Hello. So this demo is going to be about using two different methods to bring your facade geometry into Revit. The first is we are going to just use the direct shape tools, which we've talked about in the past, but this will be just another recap of that and how do you use that for facade systems. And then next I'm going to show you how to use adaptive components, which is sort of an interesting way to leverage some tools that exist within Revit concurrently with tools that exist within Rhino. Kind of go back and forth a little bit. So let's start with this definition. This is the one we did in class the other day. And I have all my geometry here. And I'm just going to make this really simple. And I'm going to use direct shape components to do this. So right here, I have my boundary surface for my chevrons. So I often will like to just grab these and we'll call these chevron and just plug them in here just so we have one place that we can go to and know that they're all in one spot. I'm also going to flatten this so it comes in as one kind of big system into into Revit. And then the other thing I need is just my triangulated panels, which are coming from here. It's these boundary surfaces. So I'm going to actually just cut and paste this component, disconnect all of this, and I'm going to call this surface glass. And then I'm going to grab my boundary surface here, boundary surface here, and now I have my glass surface and my chevron surface. And to kind of clean things up, I can just turn these off for now so you can just see that facade. And now if I open up Revit, which I've already gotten open, you'll see that we will see a preview of what's going on, but this stuff does not exist in Revit yet. And there seems to be maybe, just a little geometry preview issue that refreshing the view will solve. So we've got this is not existing yet in Revit. So if we had a building in here, we can see it in plan just as a geometry preview, but again, that's all it is a preview. So if I turn that preview off, it's gone. So what I do is I come back into here and I'm going to use, like I said, what's called a direct shape. So under the Revit tab, you have direct shape, and you can have add brep or add geometry direct shape. It's going to ask for the name, so I'm going to just make a panel, call it glass panels. It's going to ask for the category, so I can actually just go and put a category, right click on this and just come in here and pick what I want. So I'm going to just make this a curtain panel. And then the geometry, I'm going to start with the glass, plug that in. And if I come in here, you'll notice that it's there. I'm going to put this into shaded so you can see. So that's just the glass panels. Now it doesn't look like glass, but we can fix that. So one of the other cool things we can do is within Revit here, if we go into manage our materials, we can actually grab any of these materials that exist in here into Grasshopper and define what we want the material of the object to be. So I have this as glass. I have a glass. This is the preloaded template. And we could create a new material. There's lots of things we can do, but let's say we have those exterior panels are aluminum. So let's see if we have aluminum in here. Yep, we have aluminum and we have glass. So we'll just use those. So I'm just going to come into here. I'm going to go into material. And I believe it's right here. Right click, same thing. Go to glass. Okay, plug that in. And then if I come here, now this is what I have. I have glass. And it's got transparency and everything based off of the material properties. So finally, I'm going to do the same thing for the chevron. So I'll just do this again. I'm going to use the direct shape. Add geometry direct shape. Name is going to be chevron panel. Category. Right click, same thing, curtain panels. geometry is the chevrons, and then let's use material and actually define this as aluminum, and then there we go. So now if I come back into Revit one more time, we actually have different materials for each one of those. And this will update depending on what we do in Grasshopper. So now I'm going to show you a different method of doing something that's not exactly the same but similar, and it involves what's called an adaptive component. So I'm just going to pause the video, get that set up, and return to that. Okay, so one thing we haven't yet talked about in Revit is the adaptive component tool. So what adaptive components are is you can do some interesting massing studies in Revit using what's called conceptual massing. So if you do a new conceptual mass, it'll allow you to do some really funky things. Not as robust modeler as Rhino, but it's a nice way to keep everything native into Revit, and it was a way that Revit started to try to allow more complex form finding, or not form finding, but form modeling directly natively in Revit. And I think with Rhino Inside now, we don't really necessarily need to use that, but we can leverage some of the functionality that comes with that conceptual massing to create more Revit native facade systems. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to File, New, and I'm going to do a new family, and I'm going to do English Imperial, and I'm going to do conceptual, no, I'm sorry, curtain panel pattern based, which is essentially an adaptive component. So I double click on this, and you see it actually gives me this little grid of a square. And what this is essentially saying is we have 4 points, and we can create a parametric adaptive component that leverages those 4 points. This one is based off of a square or a rectangle, as you can see. I can click on this grid and I can change this from a rectangle to all different kinds of patterns, right? And what I have right now in Grasshopper is like a rhomboid pattern, right? So this is more of a diagrid type thing, less of a square. But so, you know, again, what Revit is doing is it's telling you this is point 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can set up the relationship in here, and then you can just use this, and the size will change. It'll adapt based off of whatever geometry you feed into it. So I'll show you how that works. So the thing that's also a little bit funky is the way that Revit does this conceptual modeling. So what it actually does is it has these planes and like these points that you can use to create geometry from. So for example, what I want to do is I actually want to set a work plane. I want it to be, let me see if I can get the work plane to what I want it to be. Let's see if we can use this work plane for now. And I'm going to then create a circle. So all I'm going to do is create a model line and a circle. And I'm going to start with the center of that. And you see it's going to actually draw on the plane that I defined. So I'm just going to draw it really big right now. Come back in and actually say, you know what? No, this is only like a 3-inch diameter circle. So it's pretty small. But then what I can do is I can click on this, and I can hold down Control and click on this, and then I can have this little create form thing that pops up. So I can create a solid form. Oh, it's going to cause an issue because of this self-intersecting or singular geometry. Let me see if I can actually do, what is a better way to do this? What if I actually do create form here? All right, so this is actually just giving me Okay, so what we need to do to make this do what we want it to do is we can't use one of these surfaces just because of its orientation to the curve. So I can click on here and create a point and put it somewhere along this curve. And then I can click on a rectangle, or we could use a circle as well. And if I click on this point actually and then click on the circle, it's going to allow me to draw along that circle. So let's actually get this to be, it's not allowing me to snap on the center of that. So you know what, for now, let's just draw a rectangle. Oh, I know it's wrong. I have to turn 3D snapping on. Placement, plane, pick this plane. There we go. Just a little bit of Revit fun. All right, so now we have a 3-inch radius. So I click on this, then I click on this, and I click create form, and I get this sort of, you know, tube shaped frame that's centered on that. Now what I can also do is click on the actual curve here, and I can click create form, and it's going to give me just this extrusion. And there's lots of different actual ways that you can do it. This graphically is messed up a little bit, but it actually usually shows you like an extrusion or just a plane. So I'm going to click there, and I'm going to actually get just a plane. And I can come in here and change the material of these things here by clicking on this. It has some preloaded materials in it, so let's just call it glass. And again, I could create my own materials, but this I'm going to click material, and I'm going to call this default. Just click OK. So now we have like sort of this glass material in the middle, and then this default frame on the outside. So I'm just going to save this. All right, and I'm going to load this into the project. And it doesn't do anything at first, but what I can do now is in here, what I'm going to do is I just want these diamonds right now. So I'm going to grab this, pull this down, and I'm going to actually just sort of like disable everything here. Turn that off, or I'm going to disable it for now. And now I have my surface here. I'm sorry, there's one other thing that I actually want to do before I forget. I want to triangulate my adaptive component too. So rather than doing that initial surface that we had here, so let's just curtain panels, make sure we get the right one. I want to get, let me just temporarily hide this so I can grab this one. It's a little bit, can be a little frustrating. So what I want to do is actually triangulate this. So I'm going to draw a straight line that goes from this point, and sometimes 3D snapping helps with this. So I go from this point to that point. Now this is just a line, but what I can do is grab this line, and this line, and I can do create form, and I get this triangle, and I'm going to set this height to be like, you know, 1 inch or something like that. That's not what I want to do. Let me click on this surface, click 1 inch. There we go. So you want to click on the surface that you want to move. And now what I'm going to do is grab the same thing here, this, and this, and do create form. and then pick this top surface, make this 1 inch, and now I have this triangulated panel. I can reset my temporary hide to isolate, make this material glass, make this material glass over here. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is load this into the project, overwrite the existing version, and then I'm going to come back into Rhino here, and taking these surfaces, I am going to do a deconstruct surface because I want all the vectors, because I do need those 4 points that we saw in the in the preview for the adaptive component. So now I can do adaptive, add adaptive component. It's going to ask me for the points, so I'm going to do that. And then the type, I can also use that type parameter that we used before. Right click on that, go to adaptive panel, plug that in. It doesn't want to work, so let me see. Sorry, category filter, current panels, adaptive panel, double click. Looks like it's got to think for a second. Okay, so I just paused it. It took about 30 seconds. It didn't take too long, but you can see now in here, we've actually got that skin that is built up out of the adaptive component. So what that means is if I go into Revit now, we're going to actually have to hide the old one. So what I'm going to have to do is probably actually delete this old system for now. It's pinned. Let me unpin that. Here we go. So this one too, unpin, delete that. So now we've got, actually this is purely an adaptive component based facade, and so I can click on each of the individual panels. So you can see there's a way to, like, you know, this has a little bit better parameter control. It would be very challenging to do something where you had those parameters being driven that will create more or less opening. But if you want to do something that's a little bit more normative but adaptive and working well in Revit, you can do this. So this is the adaptive component method of doing the facade panelization.